I'm coming to you with this month's video, and it is finally starting to warm up here in Maine and get into the spring weather. Today is the warmest day we've had yet this year. We actually are hitting 70 degrees today, which I kind of wish I could be filming outside, but it wasn't going to work out that way for me today. So here I am still inside at this moment, but I'm sure that by next month I will be filming outside for these videos. So I'm excited about that. For those that don't know me, I am the author of The Code Journey, and that is this book right here. Let's see if I can get it up there. Maybe not. Okay. Well, anyways, that's basically what it looks like every year. I put a new edition out on that book. And so I always am trying to listen both to what people are telling me is going on for them, but also looking at where are the energetic patterns of things that we're dealing with right now. So it's kind of a combination of the two when I create the videos and looking at what's coming up. So I think this month's video, where we're dealing with what happens when we take shortcuts. And I think this is going to be helpful for some people because I see a lot of people taking shortcuts out there. A lot of people that are just like, hey, I just want to skip the steps. Hey, can you do an abbreviated version of your work or something like that? And, this actually doesn't do us a lot of good when we do these shortcuts. So I'm going to talk about what those shortcuts are from a code perspective, and then I'll get into some points about them. Maybe some you think about, some you don't think about. And then we'll see where we are at the end of things. So it's very interesting to look at this aspect because what happens, I think, is as we go in society, more and more people are like, just give me a word, just give me a sentence. And what happens when we do this, we miss so much because in reality, when we get down to doing the work on ourselves, you can't really take shortcuts. It doesn't work. You can't skip over things that you don't like. You can't just do abbreviated versions of it because you don't actually address things when you do that. And that's part of why I don't cut down on my work. I recognize that there are going to be people that say, hey, that's just too much work and I don't want to do it. Well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's where they're at in their process. That's completely fine. And yet, on the other hand, you know, I can't shorten the work because somebody doesn't want to do the work. My work is designed for those people who are looking for growth and they want to make big changes in their life and they want to work through the stuff, whether it's hard or whether it's easy, whether it's good stuff, whether it's challenging stuff. It's about those people that really want to put the work in most of the time. So yes, does that limit me in who is going to access my work? Yeah, it probably does. But on the other hand, sometimes we just need to go into those deeper levels because that's where we grab the bigger understanding. So let's take a look. What is a shortcut or shortcuts in the terms of the code energy that they carry? And so when we look at just shortcuts, singular, in there. And when we're doing that, what we're actually doing is we are avoiding dealing with things from our past. We are looking to not really make decisions. We are shutting ourselves off from the wisdom that we need to make good choices when we take a shortcut. This is all about, I don't want to deal with the past. And that is a tough thing. And I know that is coming up for a lot of people because, particularly right now, as we come into this new moon at the end of April, we have an energy spike that's all about that. Like, like I thought I dealt with these things. Well, guess what? It keeps unfolding in layers. When we're dealing with the past, it's like we clear one layer of something, then we live with that for a while. We live with that wisdom. We go forward, we're making progression, and then we get triggered again. And lo and behold, it's like, hey, I thought I cleared that. I thought I got past that energy. I thought I dealt with that, but we're getting a whole new layer and a whole deeper layer of things. So, this is the thing is we don't actually truly ever avoid the energy because the more we try to take a shortcut or shortcuts in our life, that energy is just going to keep building and building and building. That's where some of the karmic energy comes from that we have to deal with. And at some point, that's going to catch up with us. And the more we're letting it build up because we're taking shortcuts, the bigger it's going to get, the harder it's going to be to deal with. So if we don't take the shortcuts and we have the patience and we go through the processes, we can actually do things in a more thorough way. It's kind of like if you're cleaning your house, right? And if you just go, okay, I'm just going to brush over the top of everything. Well, you're not really getting all the dust, right? Because you're not getting those deeper layers of the dust. You're not getting into the corners. You're not really cleaning. You're just knocking one layer of things off, and you're only getting a piece of it. It's like listening to somebody when you're doing five other things. You're really not taking in what they're saying. You're just getting one piece of what they're saying. You're just those Cliff Note versions, as we call it. And, yeah, you might get the gist of something, but you're not really getting what they're saying. And this is the same sort of thing. So, what's interesting is, again, this is an aspect of not wanting to deal with things that we've been through, not wanting to face things that are still having an impact in our life, when we talk about a shortcut. And so we are literally cutting ourselves off. And what happens from that is it's not just not dealing with the past, we are also cutting ourselves off from moving towards a favorable future. So people wonder, well, why do I keep going through all these spirals? Well, let's stop and ask yourself, how often are you taking a shortcut on things? And especially in this digital world, we abbreviate everything, right? You look at all the acronyms, all of the, instead of typing a word out, it's just you type a couple of letters, all of these things. We're cutting the energy off. And this isn't good. When we look at an energy, like when I look at people and they're like, oh, yeah, my name is Maureen, but now I go by Mo. Okay, well, they've just cut off all of this incredible energy. So, like in that example, it's like, okay, so you have this piece of energy that you're dealing with, and you just went from, let's say, um, from having self-worth and value to being a victim in those energy patterns by cutting it off and doing a shortcut on your name. Um, these are the things you just cut yourself out of wisdom, joy, journey, trust, and having your needs met. Was it worth that shortcut? I would say probably not. Now, when we look at the aspect of shortcuts in a plural term, and I'm looking at that from a code perspective, what is that about? That is about relationship and partnership. So when we are taking shortcuts in a plural form and we're wanting lots of shortcuts and doing lots of shortcuts on a regular basis, now what we're doing is we're disassociating. This is not about an attachment, which is a totally different thing. This is about shutting down and not connecting with things. And it's the same thing we do when we see a lot of people, if they've been through trauma, if they've been through a lot of survival points in their life, things like that. So they disconnect from that partnership energy. They don't really connect to anything. So there's multiple aspect. What it's saying is you're not connecting with what you're experiencing. You're not connecting with people. You're not connecting with the situations. You're not connecting with what is being told to you. And again, a lot of this can come back to that previous or past trauma in things that lead us to say, oh, no, I've got all these warning signals going off. My body is responding and these things. So emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever, I'm going to shut down because I don't want connection because somewhere in my past, there has been a lot of pain associated with connection. So what we find is people who have had a lot of relationship pain, people who are in a lot of relationship pain, hard or unfavorable relationships in their life, people who did not get a lot of connection, for example, particularly with their father, but it could be any of the ancestral family energy, really. They're like, those are the people that tend to go more towards shortcuts in life. Just fast, 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 let me get through things. So again, not connecting, not absorbing in there. And this is a really interesting piece. It's not something that we think about a lot when we talk about shortcuts. So this is really worth taking some reflection on, right? And saying, wow, how many shortcuts am I doing? And it's part of why, I type people's names out along the way because I don't like shortcuts. Most of the time they're not beneficial. I know it's convenient, I know it's easy, but it's not beneficial when we're cutting that energy off. Um, and again, I get it. In a digital world, I get it. People don't want to type things. It's a lot of, typing. It's just, but it's like, how much are we really saving, right? Are we even saving a second when we do that? Um, so anyways, that's kind of the core um, energy pieces from a code perspective. Now, as we get into this aspect of Cliff Notes, Cliff Notes is kind of like that phrase that we use, right? Just give me the Cliff Notes version. Don't tell me the whole story, just give me the Cliff Notes, right? And again, why is that? Because people don't want to take the time to connect in there. And so they don't really want to hear. When somebody says, give me the Cliff Notes, just shorten it down. I get that sometimes people can get on these long tangents and details on things. I understand that. And there is a time where we do need to shorten information down to be able to communicate effectively with people, to, keep something that's like, can you imagine if they reported every detail on the news? I mean, you would have a 24-hour daily news broadcast instead of, a 1 hour daily broad newscast in there. So there are places where we have to learn how to, bring the full story in a shorter, time frame, or, consolidate some of the information a little bit. But when we ask for the Cliff Notes version, what we're really getting into with this is it's like, I don't really want to hear what you have to say. That's pretty much what people are saying in many ways. I don't really want to hear what you have to say. Just give me the overview so I can pretend that I've heard and can say I've listened to you. And, this is the same thing when people want a shorter version of work. Well, just give me the Cliff Notes of it. Now there's some components in there. And one component is when people are asking for Cliff Notes, they don't want to do the work. They just don't want to do the work. Because somebody who asks for the Cliff Notes doesn't really want to understand things. They don't really want to get all the components. And when we don't get the components, again, we're not going to be able to make smart choices. We're not going to be able to really understand what somebody is going through. So see, again, this is that disconnect that I was talking about with shortcuts. This is that disconnect from being connected to people, being connected to what they're telling us, and again, just not wanting to hear it, not wanting to listen to it. Now, another part of Cliff Notes is spiritual arrogance. And I have talked about this a lot, and I've said it over and over again, that a lot of people, when they get to a certain point in their path, they think they know everything they need to know. Oh, I've already studied that. I've already looked at that. And, so I don't need you to tell me everything. This is a spiritual arrogance because the person who's truly wise, they're not concerned with that. They're not shortcutting. You're real, true spiritual people that are really rooted in wisdom. They're not concerned with how short or how long the story is because they see everything. They're not sitting there saying, "Oh, I already know everything." They're not coming from that spiritual arrogance. And most of the people that are in it cannot see that they're in it. They refuse to see that they're in it. They don't admit that they're in it, but they are definitely in it. So it's this know-it-all attitude that says, you can give me the Cliff Notes because I already know what you're saying. That's where that arrogance comes in. I already know everything, so you don't need to tell me in here. Now, again, this is, this is a little bit different in some ways than somebody who's constantly repeating the same thing over and over again. It's like, okay, there are people out there, and this is where you have to know people. Some people get things, boom, right off the bat, first time around, and okay, I need to pay attention and not repeat things a lot around this person. And then there's other people where it's like, okay, this person I do need to repeat because maybe they have a short attention span. Maybe they don't focus well. I know they're going to miss half the information, so I can say it as a reminder to them. So these different aspects, but this component of spiritual arrogance, it is a tricky one and it is an invasive one. And it is one that people trip up over and they don't even see that they're doing it. So really consider that when you're looking for cliff notes on something, am I sitting in that know-it-all position? And I can tell you, Jessie was there. She was there, she's been through it, she's done it, and everybody goes through it. It's part of the learning process. It's part of the growth and part of the development because people think I've researched stuff, I've learned stuff for so long, I don't need to hear this. And so they tune out, they disconnect in there. Doing too many things at once. So they're not, again, really absorbing anything. That's another reason people want the Cliff Notes version. And I see that with people, and I have people sometimes they say, well, what you write is too long. It's too long for the month, too long for the day, too long for this, too long for that. But the irony in that is those very same people, they will read something that was just as long or longer with other people, which means my work is not the priority for them, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be the priority for them. They can make whatever work they want be the priority, and that's all right. But that's another reason people ask for cliff notes because they've got all these pieces that they're trying to take in, all of this information that they're trying to learn or to do or whatever. And so they don't want to go very deep into everything. And again, this is like the surface aspect. Okay, let's look at trades, whether you're talking mechanic, an electrician, a plumber, you know, somebody that does construction work. And, there's the people out there, well, I just want somebody who can do it all. Okay, well, you might get lucky and find somebody who actually knows what they're doing. But most of the time, when you have somebody that's doing everything, a lot of times they just have the surface level information of everything. They haven't gone as deep as people with individual skills who have done things. So I caution people about that because when you are trying to absorb a lot of things at once, when you're multitasking for 5 or 6 things at a time, chances are you're not really absorbing because you're not giving it your full attention. And when people are not giving something their full attention, then they're actually not learning. They're not getting the benefits from it. And I see that over and over again. I see those people who they are giving, for example, my work, they sit down and they work with the book and they will really put their attention on it. And then they'll put their attention on other things later in the day, but they'll do like one thing at a time. So they're really absorbing the information and it's making huge and big changes in their life. And then I see other people that they're trying to do 2 or 3 things and they're taking the work and saying, well, this, how does this overlap here? And how does that overlap there? And how does it, and they're trying to put it into all these other modalities, which the work I do doesn't really fit into other modalities. It incorporates a whole variety of different modalities, over 50 different modalities, practices, belief systems, thoughts, things like this. But it doesn't use them in one particular traditional way. So you can't really take it and compare it to something else and say, well, your work says one thing, but these people are saying another way, right? We're looking at things from 2 different perspectives in that sense. So I really caution people, I get it again in these days and times, right? You're reading 3 different articles at once and you're listening to a podcast at the same time because you want to keep up on everything, but then you're just not absorbing it. You're just not really taking it in. You're just getting these surface pieces. Information gets mixed up. And pretty soon it's like everything is all mixed in a big stew pot. Basically, I guess that's the way to put it. So, sometimes you get some great flavors that way, but a lot of times you miss the flavors of the individual foods and you're not really, getting them. So I don't know that that was the best example, but but here again, you want to stop and look at it, and I feel like, and here it would be like, okay, what if a car mechanic was working on your car, but while he's working on your car, he's reading other things on his iPhone, and he's, listening to a podcast, and he's doing other things. How good of a job do you think he's going to do on your car? Well, not as good as if he was paying full attention to what he was doing, right? So then you drive away, and then pretty soon it's like, something's not working right in my car. Well, yeah, if he wasn't paying attention to five other things at the same time he was working on your car, maybe you wouldn't be having that issue. So that's probably a better example in there. Now, whether something is short or long, when we're looking at things, whether we shorten it or whether we lengthen it, the reality of it is the work needs to be done. So we don't ever really get out of the work by shortening it. Again, what it's going to do is it's going to build up in a karmic energy pattern, and it's going to be heavier and harder and stronger and more intense to deal with. So if we just deal with it to start with, if we just take the time up front, then it's not going to be such an issue moving forward. And this is the same thing, like if somebody procrastinates on something, it gets bigger and harder and heavier to deal with, or you let something go and you don't talk about it with your spouse or your partner or your friend or boss or whoever it is. And pretty soon it becomes such a big issue, you never want to deal with it. So it's the same kind of concept in there. You don't get out of doing the work. The work is going to have to be done whether you try to shorten it or not. And so in reality, that work really can't be shortened because it's about processes. It's about, when you get through one thing, then you can get through another. And I see a lot of this impatience when we talk even about things in the world that are happening, and people are like, I want to see this happen. I got to have it happen right now. And there's such an urgency there, which is, not a favorable energy that really pulls us out of spirit. When we're in that energy, it pulls us out of connection to God and divine source when we are in that energy of urgency. And so we want to step away from that a little bit, and we want to come back into this focus and say, okay, um, that let me step out of that urgency. Let me get into things because it's going to happen when it's going to happen. And I know that's not always what people want to hear, but it's like you have to go through the steps. You have to go through the steps, right? A toddler doesn't go from sitting one day to driving a car the next day because they don't want to learn how to walk. And that's what we're trying to do in society in a lot of ways is it's like, well, I don't want to go through all the steps. I just want to get to the accountability piece. But if you don't take the steps along the way, if you don't, you know, do it fully, one, you're cutting yourself off of the so-called rewards for the favorable things. And then two, you're not actually making any of the accomplishments that you want to make. These things take time. And, some people can go through parts of the process sooner than other people, and then they might drag in other parts that are easier for those other people. It's a process, and you just can't shorten that process in there. So you're going to have to deal with it at one point or another. So why not take your time to do it right at first so that you don't have to deal with it 5 or 6 times? And that is one of the huge advantages of taking our time with something up front. It's again like thoroughly cleaning a place. When you thoroughly clean it, you don't have to go back in and clean it 5 or 6 times if you've thoroughly cleaned it that one time. So you don't have to do that bigger cleaning all the time in there. So definitely some pieces to think about in here. Now, another part about shortcuts is that it creates stuck or stagnant energy for us. And, if you think you're frustrated with how long something is taking to get through or to learn or to deal with or to experience, how are you going to feel when everything kind of comes to this halt and gets totally stuck? because every time we try to do the shortcuts, that's a piece of energy that we're creating. So that means you're going to be stewing without anything happening without any growth, that you're just going to be in this space where nothing is moving, nothing is going forward. It's better to take the turtle's pace, as they say, than it is to try to rush ahead and then end up in a tar pit where you can't do anything. You don't you don't get ahead that way. You just make things harder on yourself. Also, shortcuts is a form of greed. And this is something that's very interesting. And that's, again, a piece that most people don't connect. And why is it a form of greed? Because when we're focused on taking shortcuts, part of what that is really about is getting as much as we can without having to do anything for it. It is about, it's like that aspect of, I'm just going to rush around and grab as much as I can, even if it's not healthy for me. Even if I don't get something good in that process, I'm just going to get as much as I can in there. It's kind of like just going in and seeing how full you can make your cart um, by after being in the store in 5 minutes, as opposed to getting anything that's of actual value in there. And so what I find is a lot of times people that are doing shortcuts, they also tend to have like hoarding patterns to them. They get things and then they don't want to give them away. And part of it is what they're getting, there isn't much to give away because they've cut themselves out of all the valuable pieces in there. So there's this definite greed aspect because, again, the shortcuts are about this fast-paced energy. I've got to take in as much as I can. And again, it doesn't really matter if you could go in and you could read 30 papers in a day, whether you do that online or in reality. Not that anybody's sitting down doing that, but sometimes it can feel like that, right? In some of these truther communities, where you've taken in all of this information, but you haven't really absorbed the information. You don't actually know anything at the end of it because you're just reading headlines. And so you're not actually getting the story or actually knowing the truth, because those headlines are designed to captivate you. And sometimes the headlines are a 180 opposite of what the story actually is. So then you're working from lies and deception and things that aren't true. And then that sets you back even more. So that's another piece with that. Trying to do things from formulas, routine, force. This is another thing that I see with a lot of people who look with shortcuts. Everything's got to be so structured. Why? Because they believe that structure allows them to take in so much more in much less time. So if everything is a formula, if everything's a routine, if everything is a force, what's happening? If it's all forced, then they're not thinking about anything. And this is another piece of shortcut energy. Again, you don't have to have that partnership with it. So if you're not having a partnership and you don't have to think about it, that's another component of it with shortcuts. It's like, just, tell me what it is. It's kind of this, aspect of what we live in our society and culture. Just tell me what it is. I don't really want to know about it. Just tell me what it is. And you see, that does not progress us. That does not get us anywhere when we do that. And then the other part about shortcuts is it shuts down our creativity. Because we have that disconnect, because we're not creating a connection or a partnership with it, because we are not dealing with the whole dynamic and the whole aspect of something. And when we're just taking in the information, like just reading the headlines, you have nothing that you're actually thinking about, nothing that you're sitting down connecting the dots. And that's a big part, like with my work, where people sit down and it's like, oh, wow, when I read this and I fully read it and I fully took it in, I'm connecting all these dots about how I do that in my life. I could see all these pieces happening. And so then they can start to bring out their creativity. Oh, well, I see this is happening. So I wonder what I can do to to help this energy out. I wonder what I could do to change this up. I wonder what different thing, and it actually stimulates the other thought processes and it stimulates the brain to work in a certain way. And it opens up their ability to start to think outside of the box instead of just accepting what they're told. So shortcuts are kind of like the fast food thing, right? Fast food doesn't give you quality. You're in, you're out, you drive through the restaurant, you make your payment, you have your food, and you think that's food, which most of it isn't food, right? Most of it has no nutrient value. Most of it has no real nourishment to you, you know? And then you sit down, and the other dynamic is when you're not doing it, you sit down and you have a meal, right? You don't just rush in with everybody doing their own thing. The whole family sits down, has a meal together, has a conversation, talks about their days, right? This is almost something that is obsolete these days. Or you sit down and you have a meal that you just luxuriate at. You don't rush through it. And when you don't rush through it, you actually get the flavors of the food, right? You actually get in there and you get to savor it and you stop for a little while and you have a conversation if you're with somebody, or you take in the atmosphere and the ambiance and things like that. So these are this is kind of like the difference. When we take the shortcuts, it's like going through the drive-through. And when we, don't take the shortcuts, we actually enjoy the meal and we actually get something that's going to help our body. So I'm hoping these components actually help you of what happens when we do take these shortcuts, what happens when we go through these processes, how we're cheating ourselves. And, again, it's not to say that there isn't a place at some point, but our shortcuts that we take should be very, very rare. They should be very rare circumstances, like when, we've got to get to the hospital because our relative was just admitted or something like that. That might be a time, but again, we might even be better to say, look, can we just talk about this another time? Because I've got to get to the hospital right now. It's actually a form of survival mode in a sense. Um, and as we know, when you're in survival mode, again, you're not taking in everything completely. You're in this space where you're not really aware of everything that's around you. You're just taking in an immediate reaction to something. So I hope you'll give that some thought. I hope you'll consider this over the next month, and I hope you have a really, really great month. Thank you, everybody. And again, if you want to check out my work, head over to compassioncodes.com, and that's my website. You'll see on the goods tab, select the code journey. That's there. I do some study sessions. We get into all kinds of great conversations and things like that. If you like the video, if this has been helpful and useful, share it out, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment, all of those great things. Subscribe to the channel. It helps me out. That's one of the great easy ways that you can help me out on here, because as much as I don't really care for some of the social media stuff, I understand there's got to be some metrics built up in there, and it does help my work get out to more people. And hopefully that is a good thing, that hopefully it's helping people along the way. Take care, and I will see you next month.